There's a phrase that I use quite often, and it's be grateful, not satisfied. And I think in life, we get so focused on, we're either pushing for more or we're accepting what we have. Better to work on your strengths and really improve those, because you're going to go further than if you're trying to close gaps, right? Like, for instance, I'm an introvert. If I kept trying to fix my sales by telling myself I need to be more of an extroverted sales professional, I would fail. When I start to feel like I'm pushing to find the right words, a lot of times I'll just step back and go, I just need to listen.
What you just heard is a glimpse of my conversation with Eric Franco about what happens when you stop treating the most distinctive part of who you are like something to hide. By the end of this episode, you'll see your own brand differently. Why the words other people use for you can be worth more than anything you invent. Why a title you're proud of might quietly be costing you clients. And how to connect the different parts of your experience into a clearer point of difference. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil. My next guest is an aerospace insider who turned extreme introversion into a strength, then created a playbook to help others do the same. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited for our conversation today, and I'm going to jump right in. So now, for much of your early career, you weren't really asking, what do I want to do? You were asking what was the responsible choice for the family, right? So you move from retail to a law firm and then eventually to Raytheon. But the job you actually loved, the law firm, is the one you left. So what made responsible win that argument or fight?
Well, it didn't even feel like a fight, to be honest with you. Like you mentioned, right? My early career, let's say the first 10-ish years of my working career was really based on what was best for the family around me. Whether it was when I was at home with my parents or when I got engaged to my wife or married to my wife, it was always about what was best for us, right? So I took the job with the better benefits. I took the job with the better pay. Closer to home, easier for transportation or whatever it was for the family. And so when I was at this law firm and I was posed with an opportunity to go to Raytheon, it was a split second. It hit what my family needed. It hit what my future kids as they continue to grow would need. And it was a no-brainer. I said yes within a minute of the offer. It wasn't until later in life that I actually realized that I wasn't considering my own thoughts.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I think it's generationally we've been taught, at least a lot of men have been taught to sort of focusing on what is right for the family, right? Instead of ever stopping to ask if this is what I really want, if this is what I want to do. And also, I don't think self-care was a concept for a very long time, right? Because it's taken me a long time to realize too that, if this engine is not running, then I can't help anybody else, right? And I think that concept was alien for a long time.
It really was. I mean, growing up, it was very much, you're the provider, you're the breadwinner, right? And that was definitely the case in our family as my wife stayed home with the kids. And so I really felt I was selfish if I thought even for a second about what I wanted. It was about what was best, right? And like you said, like self-care completely out the window. I would work early mornings until late afternoons. And then when I was in school, I'd jump on, my class around 9 p.m. and I wouldn't go to bed till 1 and back up again at 5 something. And I did that for many, many years. It's amazing how much further you can go when you actually pause and work on yourself in order to fuel everybody else.
Yeah, true. But we were never taught that, right? That's a lesson you have to learn. And also, the funny thing is, as you talk about that, you also have to wonder, like, maybe your family also needed you, right? The kids needed you to be around more, and we never thought about those things, right? And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, as I think about it as you talk, like we thought about doing the best for the family as sort of being the breadwinner, right? And that was it. Everything else was sort of secondary. So, and I'm glad we've sort of wisened up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, I spelled love as Money, right? How much money was I bringing to my family, right?
Yeah.
Did we have the right things? Did they have the clothes and the toys and those types of things? And it wasn't until later on that I really understood, like my friend Larry Hagner says, kids spell love Time.
Yeah.
And really being able to give some of that is crucial, either for myself or for them as they're growing up.
True, true. So now you're at Raytheon. You made this decision. It was the best one that you thought at the time, and yet that changed very quickly, right? So I remember you telling me in our pre-call that you went from feeling like you'd made the responsible choice to actually pulling off the road one morning. So tell us a little bit about what was building to bring you to that moment, and what was going through your mind when you stopped that car and pulled off the road.
Well, it was a few different things, right? Historically, up until that point when I joined Raytheon, my work really spoke for me. I didn't have to be loud. I didn't have to market who I was or what I wanted to do or those types of things. My success, my impact in the organization on the people around me always provided new opportunities. But as I went into Raytheon, I realized really quickly I was no longer Eric. I was a number. It's just a mass sea of cubicles and buildings and more cubicles and buildings and more cubicles. And so you're not really known by your name, you're known by the number.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what you do. What matters is, what did you do and is it visible? And for an introvert like myself, that was extremely difficult to grasp. Um, I was very good being on my own and putting my head down and getting things done. But as soon as I was hit in the face with that reality of it didn't matter anymore, I needed to do some extra things, it really made me uncomfortable. And then on top of that, unfortunately, I had a really bad manager that micromanaged, would come up to me on a Friday and say, okay, 2 weeks ago on Tuesday at 9:30, what were you working on? And if I couldn't answer it within a split second, she'd investigate my time card charging. She'd investigate what I was working on. Right. And it's just, she was just a really, really poor leader. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they didn't find out for a while, but it really pushed on my psyche quite a bit. So you have the introverse piece, you have the poor leadership piece, and the pressure of having to provide for the family, right? To bring things in, realizing that it is a well-paying job. It's better than I had before. It's better than I've ever had. And how can I be upset with that, right? I need to man up and deal with it.
Yeah.
And for months, I dealt with it and dealt with it. Sleep was getting bad. I was having nightmares about, work, so much so that I couldn't tell the difference of what happened in real life versus sleep.
Wow.
And there came a moment where, as I was taking the drive to the office, I'm driving and I could feel the car slowing down a little bit, but my heart was just pounding and pounding and just faster and faster as I inched and inched closer and closer. And it came to a point where I just felt like it was going to burst out. And so I had to pull off the road.
Wow. Yeah.
And the moment I pulled off the road, it was like someone was choking me and just slightly let go. I could take a breath. And it was in that moment that I really realized I needed to do something different. If not, I wasn't going to be here for my kids, right? And my
Yeah.
kids were small, less than 5. And so I couldn't fathom that aspect of it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's very often we have a wake up call, right? That leads to a pivot, and unfortunately, a lot of the time it's a lot later and further than we had. And I'm sure the signs were there, right? You just sort of ignored them, and like you said,
I
what
pushed
we were
through.
taught to do was just sort of white knuckle through it. Like you said, man up, I think is the word you used. And that's kind of what a whole generation was told is like, life will be tough, suck it up, deal with it, don't complain, do your job and just bring that paycheck home. And that's what you're doing, right? For the most part.
Very sure.
So now they gave you a month of medical leave after that, right? And you said you did one of the hardest things you'd ever done. You sat down and asked yourself what you wanted, maybe for the first time in your life, right? So what surfaced during that month and how did it lead a burned out aerospace guy back into a classroom to study psychology?
It was definitely the hardest thing. So I went in, right, from the time I pulled off the road to the time the paperwork got all approved. I knew I had to do something different. I didn't know what that different was. I just knew it had to be different. And in all honesty, I've never asked myself what I wanted for myself, right?
Yeah.
I got married really young, met my wife really young. And so my responsibilities were always set. Early on in that question, there was a lot of negativity, right? It was a lot of my mind talking back to me about all the negatives, right? You couldn't hack it. You should have been able to do it, right? It's not this physical force. It's just mental. You clock in, you clock out. And so the first week ish was a lot of me pushing through those negatives and trying to build a foundation of strength and confidence where I could say, I need to move past this and I can move past this. Then as I kind of went through that and I didn't falter and I was able to continue on, I started to ask about what I really wanted to be when I grow up, right? Which is the tough question everybody asks. And what I realized was you can't get stuck on what do you want to be. So I stepped back and I asked myself the question of what are the types of things I want, right? How much um, interaction do I want with clients? How much impact do I want on a team? Do I want to lead? Do I want to travel? Do I want to work internationally? Right? Just a list and list of questions. I wish I would have had ChatGPT back then. Um, and what I realized was, as I started to build my own job rec of what I really wanted and where my strengths really aligned. And then I started thinking, okay, well, where does this fit? And as a kid, a few times I always wanted to be a psychologist. I just am mesmerized by the mind. I love the way, people think, the nuances of why decisions are made or behaviors are done and those types of things. And so I was like, I'm going to go back to school for psychology. And up until this point, it's been all business, right? I
Yeah.
had my bachelor's in business, my MBA, and I was willing to basically just say, that's all gone. It's a mulligan and I'm going to restart. Right. And started looking into schools, started talking to career counselors and those types of things. And what I told myself was I wasn't going to make a rash decision. I was going to give myself a week to call a bunch of places and talk to a bunch of places. One of the best decisions I made because with one particular career counselor, he, had the conversation with me. He went through my background and he goes, you'd be a really good fit for our industrial organizational psychology. And I go, what's that? And he says, business psychology. And I was like, there's no such thing. Stop messing with me. Right. And then he walked me through the process. He talked me through like what it was. I researched the school, one of the top 5 in the country, and talked to my wife and I went for it. Right. What was weird was as I started to go through the classes, it felt really easy. And this was supposed to be a top 5 school. And so I remember actually talking to the career counselor again and the teacher and saying, this should be harder. Why isn't it harder? Like, are you guys just a cake degree?
Yeah.
Right. And they sat me down. They're like, no, this isn't easy, but it's easy for you. And it was in that moment I realized, wow, for the first time ever, I actually read the material in school. For the first time ever, I did extra. For the first time ever, I responded to multiple discussion boards because it was interesting. It enlivened my senses, right? And so it was in that moment where I was like, this is exactly what I want, right? Now, did I know it was going to lead to what I've built now? No. But what I did know was for the first time ever, it was going to be something for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself too that you said you always wanted to be a psychologist somewhere in the back of your mind, right? But yeah, you never chose that path. And I'm thinking, I always wanted to start a company and I never did that. And the reason is because there was no roadmap. I had no role models. I had nobody, in my family too. I mean, I come from India, and my favorite joke is by a Egyptian comedian who said his mother once told him, "You're either an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure." And India is somewhat similar. You kind of have these tracks, and you got to go build careers in these professions, and everything else is like you're never going to make money doing that. You're never going to have a so if you have nothing in front of you, sometimes you just take the most what should I call it, the most viable path, right, that you believe is, and your parents mean well, right? They're not trying to
They
railroad
just
you into
didn't know.
something. They just didn't have any other blueprint, right? That's what they knew
Yeah.
to have a steady, sustainable career, and these were the tracks. You go into management, you go into business, that's how it worked. So it's interesting, and I'm glad you sort of took the leap when you did.
I mean, it's definitely a jump into an unknown for
Yeah,
sure, right? Which was really scary. The blessing I have is I had a wife, or I still have a wife, same wife, that is very supportive,
yeah,
right? And she, at that point, was like, "You've always provided. I know things will work out. You're smart. You're always going to be better than average. And so work on what you want." And so she was my rock during that time when I couldn't be,
yeah.
right? It strengthened our relationship. It really gave me more perspective as far as what I want from my own kids. Um, but it also gave me purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And you were not just going through the motions, right? Which a lot of jobs you do, because you're just, like you said, you're chasing the paycheck because you do what you think you're supposed to be doing rather than what you would love to be doing, right? So, yeah, and I don't think there's enough, we don't talk enough about that, right? The intersection of, you can still be a provider, but you can also find the intersection between something you're passionate about and making sure that provides, right? That is a conversation I don't think existed until, pretty recently now. So, and maybe we have Gen Z to thank for it. I don't know, but
I don't know, but I can tell you it's one of the best conversations I've ever had with each of my kids about that
yeah,
intersection.
right. Yeah. And also, the time we live in now, you mentioned ChatGPT a few minutes ago. I think the ability to reinvent yourself is, you can do it at any age. I have a friend who just started her new business at 75. It's awesome.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing.
it is. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about brand building and marketing now. Now, you operate in two distinct worlds, right? As I like to think about in terms from a brand standpoint. You're this aerospace insider who fixes high stakes organizational systems, but you're also this introvert ninja who helps introverts stop treating their temperament like a flaw, right? So when someone new meets you, I'm curious, which one comes out of your mouth first? And does the other one ever feel like it's waiting in the wings?
For a long time, I felt like they were two different personalities and they needed to be separate.
Yeah.
And so it was very much a Clark Kent Superman, like which one needs to be out at the certain time. The other ones don't know about the other ones, right? And it was like almost a dual personality. It it wasn't until later in life that I really realized it's more like a coin. It's two sides to the same coin, right?
Yeah.
When you step back and you look at the industry I'm in, aerospace, defense, right? Very big engineering market, right? Tons of engineers. Most engineers, about 73, 75% of them are introverts.
Hmm.
And so when you look at an aerospace company, majority of the individuals are introverted to some extent. Now, many of them figured out what I needed to figure out, which was how do you flex styles,
Yeah.
right? And so when I went through that process, I really turned on something that many introverts just don't realize. Because me as an early introvert, I always thought I got the bad end of the stick. I thought I needed to try to change myself to become an extrovert. Um, I thought it was negative to be an introvert. I didn't see the benefits and the strengths and the capabilities of being an introvert until later. And so when I actually go into an event, and you always get that same questions as you're, walking across people at a networking event. Oh, hi, what's your name? What do you do? Right? That type of
Right.
thing. And I always go with, I'm 20 plus year aerospace professional who identifies, problems that have not been able to be solved. Right. And then usually somewhere within the next couple of minutes, Introvert Ninja comes out.
Yeah.
And it's usually because it's part of the environment, right? They're talking about how their managers aren't leading to the extent they want. They're not out in front, and there's those types of things. And then I bring those things up. And so I think a lot of what I am and who I am now is trying to understand it's not an either or thing. It's an integration of both, right? It's you put two pieces of water into a pail, like which one's which? You can't tell the difference anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something a lot of people who have done a bunch of different things struggle with, right? Because they either sort of like mash them up together, which also doesn't make sense, or they try to separate them and compartmentalize them, which also doesn't work because you are still the same person, right? Like I always tell people, I worked in IBM for many years, and, we did ads with kids and with magic boxes and fairies and penguins, right? It was a serious business brand. But the thing is, just because you put on a business suit doesn't mean you internally change who you are, right? You're still human. You still relate on the same level. You still emote. You still laugh at the same things. And I think that's the thing people struggle with is they feel like they have to put on from a brand standpoint, especially you have to wear a mask, right? They think you have to become what people want you to be rather than who you actually are, right? The trick is
Right.
really making sure you put those pieces together properly, right? When I say properly, I mean in a way that's relevant to your audience. That's the important piece. Not sanding it down, not, dumbing it down, or not showing only one side and hiding the other, but actually complementing each other, kind of the way you were talking about it just now.
No, I mean you couldn't be more right. As soon as I started to do that, things accelerated,
Yeah.
right? Because I wasn't putting effort in keeping walls or making sure somebody didn't go into this door or that door, right? Of my personality. It was purely this is who I am, right? I am an introvert ninja, and I love being the introvert ninja. I love helping introverts really understand and appreciate who they are and understand how they're going to apply those skill sets to whatever goal they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily for us, Superman finally figured it out in the last installment that they made. So I want to talk a little bit about more. I love the Introvert Ninja, right? And I love that you didn't invent it. People started calling you that, right? But you also told me you've never fully embraced it or built around it, right? Why do you think you've still kept it at arm's length?
Well, I mean, what's funny is like you said, right? I was helping people do what I did, understand how to appreciate who I am, understand my strengths, and how to apply them. And after a little while, I started to gain quite a bit of a following at work. People were coming to me asking for the help. And a few times people came and said, I'm looking for the introvert ninja. First time I heard it, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. But after I kind of learned, I embraced it at work, but it was also one of those things like, a ninja's kind of does things in the shadows. So there was a part of me that's like, this is perfect because I still don't like publicizing. I still don't like putting things out there. Um, but life has a funny way of putting you in positions to do the things you need to do, right? To meet your full potential.
Right.
Right. And I think we talked a little bit about the whole COVID thing. COVID hit, the little COVID thing.
Yeah.
COVID hit, right? And everyone's in their houses, right? People are working from home if they're lucky and those types of things. Kids are doing online school that's not really online school, right? At best, they're getting a little bit of work. And my kids were no exception. They were driving my wife up the wall because they were only really going to school online for a few hours, doing their homework really quick, and then bored out of their minds. And again, it's life putting in front of me the opportunity to bring out that brand. And so up until that point, there wasn't more than maybe 100 people that knew about the Introvert Ninja that I
Yeah.
was aware of. But at that moment, my wife's like, we got to get them busy. We got to get them doing a project or something, right? And we're thinking about it. My kids were in middle school and in early stages of high school, my oldest. And I was like, well, let's look at that intersection of what they want, what they're good at, what they enjoy, and let's create a project, right? And so we created the project of we're going to have them illustrate a children's book
Right.
because they were really big into graphic design. And so I took the model that I was using for people, professionals, and I wrote it as a children's book. Took me a little bit. I built out a project schedule, right? I put each of them on tasks, including my younger ones, to help with like naming and location sets and stuff like that. But we made it a family project where every week we were touching on it
Yeah.
and they were bringing me updates and, and those types of things. But I was also taking it as an opportunity to show them the business world of deadlines. And so if they had a deadline on Friday, I would push that. Why wasn't that paper turned in? Why wasn't that drawing turned in? Right. If the dad was wearing the same color shirt for 3 days, I was like, doesn't this dad have a different color shirt?
Yeah.
Right. And so it was a great opportunity for them to get a taste of it. It was an amazing opportunity for me to work one-on-one with each of my kids on something they really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because as they were describing what they did or why they did it this way or that way, like I could see their eyes light up. Right. And I was like, okay, this is something they're interested in. But by the end of it, we had a children's book and we went to print, went to Amazon, right? And got good, good ratings. I got onto a dad podcast called, The Dad Edge with Larry Hagner. And things went well. And it's a great opportunity for them to kind of get a little bit of money in. But more than anything, it's something on their resume too, that they're a published illustrator.
Yeah.
Right. But for me, man, that is a memory I will always have. And when I think back about my biggest memories, the Introvert Ninja has been there quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so over the years, getting back to your question, right, I've been putting it out there here and there, right? I think it wasn't until a few years ago I actually added it to my LinkedIn. And so I am working towards actually making it a bigger brand. And I think it's all about timing. I think I'm ready and I think the brand is ready. And more than anything, I think I owe it to the people that still need the help.
Yeah. And the greatest power in brand building is when other people sort of come to you, look for help with that superpower, if you like, right? So I think I'm glad to hear that you're embracing it, and I would encourage you to embrace it fully, because that's also something that helps you stand out in the category, right? Because it's actually the brand actually demonstrates what your superpower is, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Introverted Ninja, people get it immediately. You don't have to explain it. They're not like 10 lines of copy.
It's memorable. Like
Yeah.
I've met people that I've met at events, 6 months, a year later, and that is exactly what they call me. They may not remember Eric, but they remember I'm the Introvert Ninja.
Right. Yeah. In my case, they remember my dog. They don't remember me, which is not as good, but I'll take it. People routinely walk up to me in the street. They'll know the dog's name and they'll be like, "Who are you?" Anyway, but so let me ask you for the other side of this now, right? So now you lead with business psychologist, which is accurate, but it's one of those titles that people think they understand, right? So when you say it, what do people tend to assume you mean? And what do you wish they understood instead?
Oh, this is such a good question. So I will tell you, when I'm at an event and someone says, what do you do? And I say, I'm a business psychologist. It is really a take back question. Like they're like, whoa, right? Because usually I go to events where it's mostly engineers and, production people and those types of things. And it's not something they typically hear.
Yeah.
And they go, whoa, what's that? Right. And a lot of times I will ask them, I was like, well, what do you think it is? Right. And I had one gentleman tell me a phrase. He goes like, do you put the the building on the couch.
Right.
And I was like, in a sense, right? But they tend to get guarded. They're like, oh, you're a psychologist. Are you reading my mind? Right. And that type of thing. And I have to assure I'm not that kind of psychologist. Like,
Right.
I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm not taking out a prescription pad of, that's more of a therapist, but like, I'm not doing any of those things. I said, as a business psychologist, I'm really looking at the connection points.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always describe it as you have the organization and you have the people. I look at how the lines in between are functioning, right? What's broken, what's not working efficiently, and where can I help improve those things?
Right.
And it's because individually they might work independently really well, but when you put them together, things break down, right? Um, the work that I've seen in a lot of the aerospace companies I've been in is phenomenal, way over my head, right? The technical capabilities that they're able to produce is amazing. And when I do see challenges of, schedule slips or going over budget or not meeting deadlines or this or that, it's rarely because the technology isn't there. It's mostly because we can't seem to get on the same page.
Right.
We're not driving in the same direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not focusing on the critical tasks as a group. Our leaders aren't able to develop and move our team in the right way in order to address change or failures or missteps or those types of things. And those are the things that I love to work with.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting when you up front you also you kind of said that because psychologist is a loaded word, right? People already come with things in their mind, so almost like so you have to sort of back out of explaining to them what it isn't, right? Before you start explaining to them what it is. And that's the other thing. I mean, not to belabor the point, but that's why I love Introverted Ninja, right? As the sort of lead thing, because you're not clearing up confusion, right? And there's more power in that than having to first, clean up what they think it is and then explain what you do. So it's just something to think about. But I think it's an interesting
I think you got a really good point.
challenge. But yeah, so let's talk about. I want to talk about the model you built. Now you built a model called HEAR that helps introverts earn promotions and step into bigger opportunities, right? So let's pick any situation, or let's pick a situation solopreneurs tend to dread. A networking event, you talked about that, I'm an introvert, a big pitch, or walking into a room where they know no one, right? So can you show us how HEAR works in practice? Like, what would you have them do before, during, and after?
Well, I'll give you a recent scenario, right? A
Yeah.
small technical expert went off and built his own company. What he had been doing for the last 20, 25-ish years, amazing product, amazing technical detail, right? Those types of things, definitely a need for it in the industry. And so he opened up his own company to be a supplier. Technology wise, brilliant, right? Where he started to question and have trouble was, where do I go get business? How do I get business? How do I explain things to people that maybe aren't the technical experts, but they're the purchasers, right?
Yeah.
They're the program managers, somebody that maybe doesn't have as much experience. What do I bring to the table? And so self-doubt starts to creep in, imposter syndrome starts to creep in, right? And so I met him at an event, and we actually just started talking mainly about the introvert piece.
Yeah.
And it came to a point where he started telling me, oh, I have this new company and I'm doing this and I'm struggling with this and I can't seem to do it. And I go to these events and I don't talk to anybody. And then I leave and then I kick myself because I didn't work on sales and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And I'm just not a sales guy. Right. And so I talked to him about the model that I've used and we started working together. So the Introvert HEAR model, and it's HEAR, is simple. It's not groundbreaking, but it's something that starts internally and then goes outward. And so the first step of the model is H, which is honor. Honor who you are, what you bring, your strengths, right? And one of the biggest challenges I think each of us overcomes is working towards perfection and beating ourselves up in the process.
Mm-hmm.
right? We get a performance review and we had 9 things that were said great about us and 1 that was negative. And what do we focus on? The 1 negative,
True.
right? We got 99 questions right and 1 missed. And what do we focus on? The 1 that's missed,
Right.
right? And so understanding that, 1, nobody's perfect. Nobody will ever be perfect. And it's better to work on your strengths and really improve those because you're going to go further than if you're trying to close gaps, right? Like, for instance, I'm an introvert. If I kept trying to fix my sales by telling myself I need to be more of an extroverted sales professional, I would fail.
Right.
But if I leverage my introverted skills to be a salesperson, I could have success.
True.
And so that first H, or the only H in honor, is all about really appreciation of who you are. It's getting to the point where you appreciate who you are, what you bring, your strengths, and you're okay with you're not perfect and there's things you don't need to do because in reality, you don't need to do everything.
True.
And so that first activity is really internal of how do I get to the point where I can appreciate who I am? Right. And so for this individual, it was a lot of inner reflection. It was a lot of journaling, a lot of conversations between him and I, and activities that I would give him to kind of work through that process to where he got to a point where he understood who he was and what he could bring. Right. And then we moved on to the next phase, which is the E, which stands for energy. And that really talks to, well, in life, you're either up for something or you're not feeling it.
Right.
Right. And if it's something you really enjoy, you have the energy to go do it. If it's something you don't enjoy, all of a sudden you're tired, right? You feel your knees a little bit more when you're getting up from a chair, like all those types of things.
True.
And so what I realized early on is even though we may understand our strengths and we understand what we bring, we still have to prepare for the event. And so we took a networking event that he was going to, right? And he had always told me like he didn't really talk to anybody. He would walk around a little bit and maybe say hi, nothing much, but he never got anywhere with sales. And so we went in and we said, okay, let's talk through this. What do you do right before? And he's like, well, I'm working in my lab and doing this and doing that. And then like I'm always having to push myself out of the lab because I'm enjoying it so much. And I have to go do this networking thing. And I was like, okay, so what I'm hearing is already you're going in with a negative of like, I'm being forced to leave something I enjoy to go do this.
Right.
Right. And he's like, yeah, I never thought about it, but I guess that's true. And I said, are you naturally gifted to where you can go in and have conversations? He's like, no. He goes, I like to be prepared. I have lists for everything. I have schedules for everything. I have Excel for everything. And I said, okay, so let's get your energy work prepared. Like if you enjoy what you do, great. Let's have you work on it. But you need a transition period. And so we would look at those types of things. We would look at when he parked in the parking lot, what are some of the things that he would do in order to continue to prepare? Right.
Yep.
And so I had him read through out loud in his car some of those strengths that he had, some of the successes he had, the accomplishments, the impact he had in other organizations, right, to build up the confidence and build up the energy because it was things that he really enjoyed. And as a result, he was able to go in with some momentum, with some energy into the room, right? And energy is infectious. You can see who has energy, who's smiling, who's not smiling, right?
Yeah.
So he had more people coming up to him, right? And then he would move around a little bit and talk to a few more people. And so when he came back out of that session, he came back and reported back. He's like, for the first time, I feel like I actually have something to follow up with some of these people. He had a few good conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm kind of jumping into the third letter here, which is A, which is all about action, right? We had him take action, go do it.
Right.
And the key thing with action is simple, small steps.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you put in front of you, like, hey, I'm gonna go build a house. That's huge.
Yeah.
right? But if you put in front of you, like, I'm going to draft 15 different ideas of what type of house I would like just on a piece of paper. Okay, that can be done in a half hour, 45 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And so what I really worked with him on is taking his thought process from, I got to finish this big technical project, down to, I need to do this small thing when I walk into this networking event,
Right.
right? Case in point for me, I used to give myself a goal that I would talk to 4 people, let's say, at a networking event. Well, I would go in, and as the introvert, I would find my corner and I would talk to whatever 4 people were there, even if it meant 2 of them were the serving staff.
Right.
And right. And then I would leave. And then I finally told myself, like, okay, I got to call myself out on that. That's not real. And so I really put together some really simple steps, right? I'm going to go in, I'm going to talk to 4 people in 4 different locations of the room, right? They all have to be networking individuals,
Right.
and I have to get a card. Simple. I could track it,
Yeah.
right? So the action piece is really focused on the simple step, which is going to be critical. The last letter, R, is review. And this is to state, not everything's going to go perfect, right? You might fumble on your words. You might introduce yourself as even the wrong name. I had somebody do that once, right? You might not talk to 4. You might only talk to 3, whatever it is. And so the R is there to basically remind people that it's not about perfection. It's about improvement.
Right.
And so what do? We review what worked, what didn't work, what are we going to change? And then it's a cycle, and then you go back and do it again, right? Because
Yeah.
in reality, by me talking to them about their strengths, by me giving them information about what energizes them or what actions they need to do, or just think about it again and review, that's good, but it's the repetition that works.
True.
And so the reason this model works is because it's small activities, small focus, to where it's continuous improvement. They're constantly running through the process over and over and over again, to where things get a little bit easier each time.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think, thank you for sharing that. I think it's a great playbook for any solopreneur listening. And what I love about it, there's lots to unpack there, but there are a couple of things that I love, which is, I love how you're building the playbook to the person's strengths, right? Because we spend so much time in this world trying to become somebody else, like even taking someone else's playbook, right? What worked for Steve Jobs is not going to work for you or for me. Now, there are things we can learn, but unless you adapt it to who you are, and I tell people this about social media too. They're like, oh, I hate social media. I mean, I do too, but you can do it in your own way, right? The way you approach it. You don't have to change who you are to do the thing that other people are doing, right? And that's, I think, the mistake we always make, is we try to do it with someone else's way. Like you said, I can't become an extrovert, neither can you. But there are ways we can operate in those same worlds and be as successful in those worlds without having to try and become someone else, or wear or put on a cape. And I love that. And also breaking it down into small pieces, because that's the other thing so many solopreneurs I talk to start by boiling the ocean. It's like, like you said, like, I want to summit Everest. Great. But you can't start there, right? If you start there, that will completely overwhelm you and you'll never end up doing it. Whereas,
Very
like you
true.
said, if you start by running, 2 miles every day or 10 miles every day to get your, whatever, all the other things you have to do, probably 1,000 things you have to do before you can even think about summiting Everest, then you're actually also getting momentum towards your goals, right? And I love the review piece too, because like you said, we will never be perfect. Trying to be perfect is just a fallacy, right? The idea of perfection. And it's accepting your flaws and understanding where you want to build your strengths, and then also understanding where you need to hire for your weaknesses, right? Because that's also all, bring in people who can help you fill in some of those weaknesses. So now I love the HEAR model. I think that's awesome. So sorry, I got excited about it, but
I love it.
Tell me something now. So let me ask you now. Now I want to touch on that piece too, which is the real unlock. You said was not becoming an extrovert, right? It was learning to flex into on mode, I think is the way you describe it, whenever you needed to, and then recover. So most people just white knuckle through it and then crash, right? So tell us a little bit about, what did you learn about protecting your energy beforehand and getting it back afterward? So, one demanding moment doesn't drain your whole week, which, can be quite common for introverts.
Well, I'll talk about myself because it's the
Yeah.
easiest one. Um, so what I learned about myself is I'm never going to be the type of individual that can go on a stage and has my very detailed PowerPoint memorized, right? It's going to be different each time. And that's okay because I bring my personality in, I bring the energy of the room, I bring the questions, I bring all those types of things. But in order to do that, I have to get really clear on what I'm trying to say. And so preparing for an event, there's the detail side that I do, and that includes things like really breaking down the bullets of what I need to show, right? I gave a presentation a couple days ago, 30-page deck to a president of an organization, and every page I knew the one or two things I needed to emphasize on that page. How it was going to come out, different every time I practiced for days,
Yeah.
right? But I knew the point that I needed to make, and I knew the story that it told. Right? I'm very much a believer in, facts tell, but stories sell.
Yeah.
And people remember stories.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of times I'll tell stories. And so my presentations are all about telling stories. And so my preparation in the detail side is all about what are the bullets? What's the messaging? Right? Who's the audience? It's looking at all those things. Then from the personal and introverted side, it's okay, what do I need in order to feel confident on that stage?
Right.
Right. And I need iron clothes. I need to look sharp. I need to have my hair cut. I need to be calm when I first walk onto that stage. And so I definitely can't go from one meeting to that. And I purposely build in blocks of time before those types of things to where I can just sit, I can breathe, I can work through the details of the presentation. And more than anything, I can remind myself that I belong there. I have the strengths. I have the results, right? I have the experiences and go out and have fun.
Yeah.
So then I'm able to just be myself. I hit the points. I have the conversation, let's say on stage. I do those things. And then when I'm done, like you said, I don't just white knuckle through it. I also realize I need someplace to regroup.
Yeah.
And so after that, immediately, I am someplace by myself with a water or an iced tea, a coffee, and I am just sitting. And I'm not going over what didn't work, which
Mm-hmm.
is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
I am going over what worked, what went well, right? And it's to remind myself that it wasn't probably perfect, but it was good, and it was me, which was better than I could ever ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in fact, I have a talk tomorrow, so I'm definitely going to borrow some of that because, and you're right, though. That's a lesson I learned a long time ago. I mean, I didn't learn. A friend of mine told me about that. She was like, when I'm speaking to like 30, 40 people tomorrow live, and, and I always felt drained after that, right? And she was like, you know what? You need to put, like you said, time aside after that to do nothing. Just give yourself time to get your energy level back up again. Because that, it does drain you. And because I would just have another meeting after that, run into something else. And I would just be like, 100 times more exhausted than I was before. And also then you enjoy it less because you're already thinking about the next thing you have to run to after you do this, right? And I would never recover my energy. So now I love that. And I'm going to, I'm going to, and it is, you naturally sort of you go to like, I could have done that better. I could have, sort of said that a different way. I should have answered that question differently. But
So I should have walked and pointed or
yeah,
anything.
but there's lots of time to review, like you said, right? That's not going away. So I like the idea of just sort of sitting quietly, and just sort of going through the things that worked. So I will steal that tomorrow, Eric.
Well, good luck with that tomorrow.
Thank you. So last question before we go to our rapid fire round. If you had to give one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Geez, that's tough. So in my head right now, I'm kind of going through like, know who you are, appreciate who you are, know what you bring, those types of things. But I'm going to go a different route. So
Mhm.
there's a phrase that I use quite often, and it's be grateful, not satisfied. And I think in life, we get so focused on, you know, we're either pushing for more or we're accepting what we have. And like we said, throughout this conversation, life is a lot about integration of things, balance of things. It's not about one or the other. And so I'm really a true believer in you got to take time regularly to appreciate what you have, what you've done, what you've accomplished, but you could still have that drive about what you want to do next. And I think one feeds the other.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's a great note to go to our rapid fire round on. So I'm just going to throw 5 questions at you and tell us what comes to mind. So
Okay.
if Introvert Ninja had one superpower and one kryptonite, what would they be?
Ooh. Let's see. So superpower would be, I'm going to say calm.
Okay.
Kryptonite would, I guess what I would say is your kryptonite would be doubt. I'm going
Okay.
to go with that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. That's good balance. What rule from aerospace should every solopreneur adopt?
Aerospace sometimes gets a bad rap for the red tape, but I think one rule is document your processes.
Yeah. I think that's a good rule, especially as a solopreneur. Go to line to politely escape a conversation.
Now, if I say this is public, no. uh, no, honestly, the one I've been using the most lately, since I go to a lot of networking events, is I really appreciated this conversation. I have a goal to talk to so many people today, and I'm going to, head off and have a couple more mini conversations, but let's reconnect later.
Love it. That's very polite. I love that. That's great. And I'm sure a lot of people will steal that one. One thing on your desk you'd grab if the office was on fire.
So on my desk, my youngest created a mold, like a Funko Pop of the Introvert Ninja from the children's book.
Wow. Okay.
Created himself, built it, molded it, painted it. That is the one thing I would grab from my desk.
Love it. And I hope they're listening. Ninja move you pull to sound confident when you're not feeling it.
I'd say that's probably it doesn't seem like it's a great move, but it is for me. It's just stop and listen.
Yeah.
When I think of a ninja, they're not all action. They're patient, right? They're picking their moments. They're listening for the environment around them. And so when I start to feel like I'm pushing to find the right words, a lot of times I'll just step back and go, I just need to listen.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I always say that my introvert superpower is I'm often the last person to speak because I've spent the most time listening, right? Because I'm not in a hurry to be the first one to speak. And that ends up giving you a lot of superpower. And a lot of people don't listen. It's amazing how people sort of jump in before they've even formed their thought. So yeah, I completely agree with you. And so that's a great way to end our show. So Eric, thank you so much for such a illuminating conversation and for sharing all your introverted ninja secrets with us.
Oh, thank you, Nikhil. This has been a pleasure. Definitely gave me some energy.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad you're able to get up that chair without feeling the knees. So mission accomplished.
Thank you very much.
I want to take a few minutes and pull out what I think matters most for you as a coach and solo expert. The first is this: language can be accurate and still be expensive. Business Psychologist is accurate, But Eric described how fast it sends people to the wrong place. Is he reading their minds? Putting the building on a couch? Before he can explain the value, he has to clear away the picture the label created. Introvert Ninja, on the other hand, does the opposite. People get it instantly, and is memorable enough that they can forget his name, but not the nickname. And here's the part that matters most for you. He didn't write it. It came from the people already on the receiving end of his work. I see this constantly with coaches and experts. You sit down to work on your brand like it's an act of invention, like you have to coin something clever. But the words that actually stick are rarely the ones you manufacture. The strongest language starts as something you catch before you shape it. And if you're inventing it entirely from inside your own business, that's usually the tell that you're too close to the work to see what other people already see. And when your opening phrase creates the wrong picture, the cost isn't just that the rest of your message does repair work. It's that the right fit client can quietly count themselves out during your intro before you've earned the chance to be relevant. The second is this. Having more than one side to your experience is not automatically a brand problem. Failing to find the connection between them is. For a long time, Eric treated his aerospace expertise and the Introvert Ninja as two separate identities. One for the corporate room, one for the shadows. But they were never competing stories. He was working inside a highly technical industry full of introverts, helping people and organizations function better. Together, the two sides explain why he could see what other people missed. This matters especially at your level, because by now you don't have a shortage of experience. The problem is the market sees the pieces separately and never understands the advantage created by the combination. So the better question is, what does this combination let me diagnose earlier, see more clearly, or solve differently for the client I most want to serve? That's where the real differentiation lies. Your experience only becomes commercially valuable when the client sees not just where you've been, but what that combination does for them that a more conventional expert can't. Third is this. A business can look responsible, sensible, even successful on paper, and still be badly designed for the person running it. Eric spent years making choices around what the people he loved needed from him. Honorable, but the cost was that he never asked what conditions let him do his best work until his body forced the question. And when you are the business, that mismatch never stays personal for long. Eventually, it begins shaping what you can sell, how consistently you can show up, and how far you're willing to grow. I think a lot of established solopreneurs recreate a quieter version of the same problem. And because the business is working, the design becomes harder to question. The clients are happy, the referrals are showing up, the revenue is respectable, so who am I to complain? But underneath the good numbers, the model still runs on a pace, a level of access, or a kind of visibility they no longer want to sustain. Then they blame themselves for losing energy instead of questioning the structure that keeps demanding it. The question is not simply, what business should I build? It's what pace, level of access, and kind of visibility let me keep doing the work I'm proud of without me disappearing inside it. And that is not self-indulgence. It's critical business design. And the final takeaway is, visibility gets easier when you stop treating it as a personality test and start treating it as a design sequence. Eric didn't become comfortable on stage by turning himself into an extrovert. He learned what he needed before, during, and after the moment. Clear on the point, the audience, and the story going in. He gave himself space to transition instead of sprinting from one demand to the next. Afterwards, he recovered on purpose and reviewed what worked before his mind could race towards everything he could have done better. He wasn't preparing to perform. He was designing the conditions that made strong performance repeatable for him. By the time you're established, the question isn't whether you can show up. You can run the room, deliver the talk, have the sales conversation when you need to. The hidden cost is doing it on adrenaline, over preparation, or through a version of yourself you can't sustain. That is why visibility can look like a discipline problem when it's actually often a design problem. The real unlock is not becoming more extroverted. It's understanding the conditions that let your strengths do the work, how much preparation you need, what role you play best, and what recovery the activity requires. The goal is not to enjoy every part of marketing and business development. It's to make the kind of visibility that produces revenue repeatable. My challenge this week: don't pick something you rarely do. Pick one visibility rep you already do competently: a talk, a podcast, a post, a sales conversation, a networking room. Then name the distinctive thing you usually sand off to make it safer: the sharper point of view, the unexpected part of your story, the introvert ninja you keep at arm's length. Write it in one sentence. Do the rep once, leading with that thing, not the palatable version, the one that actually sounds more like you. Then design the two ends the way Eric did. Before, give yourself a real transition in, not a scramble from the last meeting. And after, recover on purpose and ask 3 questions. What worked? What drained me? What will I change the next time? That's it. You're not trying to conquer the activity. You're building one version of it that uses more of what makes you distinctive and is repeatable. So visibility stops costing more than it returns. Thank you for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you're excellent at what you do, but your brand still isn't making that obvious to the right people, that's rarely a capability problem. At your level, it's more often a gap problem. The distance between what you know your work to be and what the outside world actually receives. So I built a short brand gap diagnostic to help you find yours. 9 questions, a few minutes, and it names the widest gap that's quietly costing you right fit clients. The thing you can't see on your own because you're inside the bottle, too close to read your own label. You can find it at boostsolo.com/brand gap diagnostic, and the link is also in the show notes. Take it and notice where the gap has been showing up in your business. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.